I'm Dr. Lenore Walker, and I'm a co-chair of the COVID Interpersonal Violence Group, or COVID IPV, as we call ourselves. And this is our sixth, I think, roundtable. See, the fifth or sixth roundtable that we've been hosting on Thursdays at noon. Generally, we're able to be on Zoom as well as live on Facebook. But unfortunately, we're a little delayed today because we're having some trouble getting live on Facebook. So for those of you who need to jump on Zoom, we hope that you do. We have room for more people as well on Zoom. So today we're going to talk about children and how children are coping during this pandemic. We're a group of about 10 to 15 psychologists. We vary in our numbers, and we're working with the American Psychological Association's COVID task force that was set up by the Division on Trauma, which is Division 56 in APA. But 13 other divisions and many other groups have joined us as well, working together with us. Our goal is to help mental health providers and people who use mental health services be stronger as we get through the COVID pandemics. And so we're trying to distribute ideas and materials and resources as far around the world as we can. So on our call today are people from several different countries. Let me introduce you to who's on that I can see. There are a number of non-video participants, and I can't see them, so I can't introduce them, but I will introduce Dr. Laurie Gill, who is from Canada, and she'll be one of our presenters, and Dr. Eileen Serlin, who is from San Francisco Bay Area in California, and she will also be one of our presenters today. We also have Dr. Marilyn Safer from Israel, from Haifa, Israel, and Dr. Patricia Villavicencio Carrillo, who is from Madrid, Spain. And we have Michaela Mendelson, Dr. Michaela Mendelson, who is from Boston, and Dr. Giselle Gaviria, who is from Florida, like I am. I believe I saw almost Dr. Rita Rivera, who is also from Florida. I think she's not visible, but she is one of the non-video participants. So with that, I think we're going to get started, and I'm going to turn the co-host over to Laurie Gill, who's going to start us off. So take it away, Laurie.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I'm glad to be here. These have been such unprecedented times, and children, certainly, as well as their adult caregivers, have not really known what's going on, what the outcome is going to be, what this new normal is going to look like, and everyone's adapting. And what we know is that uncertainty can be really overwhelming and can increase stress for children as well. So we often recommend with children giving age-appropriate information as best as we can. There's a really great book that was released when the pandemic first started, a children's book that I'll link in the Facebook later about staying safe at home. And it's a great little resource with age-appropriate information to help children understand some of the changes that are happening. Now things have shifted further where we're back to school. But I think as we go through these things, when we don't know what's happening, we don't always have to have the answers. But as parents, even saying, I don't really know what's going to be happening, but I know that you're okay and I'm okay, and we're going to do our best to kind of get through this and adjust together. Quite often, things that we want to keep in mind is that children need to be seen, right? Soothed, so attended to. So one of the techniques that we use regularly is called Name It to Tame It. And it really is just helping children to understand their emotional felt state Often I'll say something like, I feel or I felt as a prompt. So are you able to notice how you're feeling? When we do this, we're bringing awareness to that emotional felt state, that embodied awareness. So we're tuning into the body. When we consider what we need, we're validating and we're reflecting. So we're bilaterally stimulating the brain by tapping into that emotional felt state and forming meaning at that left brain logical level, adding speech. So a simple technique often is, prompting. Are you able to notice what you're feeling right now? Are you able to notice what would be helpful for you right now? Young children often don't know this. So as parents and caregivers, we may start out by saying, it looks like you're feeling angry, or it looks like you're feeling worried. I wonder if shaking that big anxiety out would be helpful, or I wonder if a hug would be helpful. So we can provide some different options. An activity that I really enjoy from a perspective of building a sensory vocabulary, but also building awareness, is called sensory treasure chest. So this is based on Peter Levine and Maggie Klein's work, but it is such a fun family activity. And to do this, what I usually do is get a bag that I put various tactile things in. And before we start, we'll make a list. So we'll talk about what are some different feelings that people might have, and we'll write down all of the different feelings. And then we'll talk about, well, what are different sensations that people might have in their body, right? So it might be the tightness, it might be comfort, it might be tension, it might be a prickly, spiky feeling, it might be butterflies in our tummy. So we are just building a bit of a vocabulary around different sensations. And then we talk about different tactile sensations. So smooth, rough, soft, spiky, bouncy. And the idea would be, in that sensory treasure chest that you create, I usually pick a bag that is not see-through. We would reach in and you would have things of different textures. So it might be a rock from outside, or a pom-pom, or a feather. I usually try to have something that's squishy, something that's spiky, something that's smooth, something that's heavy, all different textures, pine cones. And the idea would be to reach your hand into the bag, and we can do this with our eyes closed if it's hard not to peek, if people are comfortable with that. And then they would feel around in that bag, find one item and describe it, right? So describe the tactile feeling, describe the emotion or the feeling in their body that goes with that. And what we're doing is trying to build a sensory vocabulary and an awareness of some of those feelings and where they are in our body. But it also is such a great family activity because it helps build awareness of what does comfort look like on, my caregiver's face, or my sibling's face, or my peer's face, if we're doing it in a group, like a school setting. So that can be a really fun activity and a good way to, kind of build attachment together, but also doing something playful and fun. One of the other things that I think is important to recognize is how our brain is impacted by stress. So I really enjoy Dan Siegel's hand-brain model. Some of you may have heard me share this before, but basically if we think about the hand as a model of the brain, he says the brain grows from the bottom up and the inside out. And if we think about the base here, this would be like our brain stem. So autonomic functions, so breathing and respiration and blood pressure and our heart rate and all of that stuff, but also fight, flight, freeze responses. Then we have the midbrain, which is more so involved in things like our emotional regulation. So we've got the limbic system, which is our emotional regulatory boss, the amygdala, which has a key role in protecting us or detecting threats. So it's our personal security guard. And then the hippocampus is key for emotional learning and memory. We have the prefrontal part of the brain is the last part of the brain to more fully grow and develop. Like, it's still growing and developing into adulthood. So this is involved in a lot of the higher order functions that we really want to see children, youth, and adults using, like planning, getting up in the morning and going through their routines, time management, impulse control, right? Monitoring what they're doing, starting something, stopping something. Really, really key strategies. This is also the part of our brain that is involved in using the skills, techniques, and strategies that we may learn in therapy. However, what Siegel says is what happens when emotion becomes too big down here in the brainstem and in the midbrain, it causes us to flip our lid. And when we flip our lid, we lose access to logic, reasoning, rationalization, cause and effect, and all of those wonderful strategies. So part of our work as caregivers is recognizing when our children, youth, and even adults are about to flip their lid, right? That can be a cue for us that maybe there's big energy that needs to be discharged, or maybe there's a sense of overwhelm there, and how can we help to regulate through that? So I just wanted to share a couple little activities that are kind of fun and playful, and just to give some ideas. So when I see big energy, I often will look at trying to bounce it out, shake it out. Hokey pokey is great for young children. It's movement, it's singing, it's rhythmic. It's fun, it's silly, and we don't have enough time to just be silly sometimes. Another activity that kids really enjoy is taco breathing. So from Kundalini Yoga, this would be called Sitali breath. So I'll just guide you through that. I really enjoy this one as well. I find it quite grounding, but not everyone does, and that's okay. So the idea behind strategies is we practice some different things. If you find something that works for you, wonderful, add it to your toolkit. If it's not for you, that's okay. Hopefully you'll find something else that is. So for this one, what we would do is actually stick out our tongue, and kind of curl it. And if you can't curl it, that's okay. You can just leave it flat and breathe through the sides, but it would be like breathing in like a straw. So, and out through the nose, in through the mouth, we'll do just one more. And just noticing how that felt. Anyone comfortable sharing? Maybe I heard a little giggle, so maybe playful or silly. Kids often laugh at me when I teach that.
No, I actually enjoyed that one. Usually, you're given a straw to work on, and being able to do that breathing technique almost similarly, it kind of reminded me of it. One of the techniques is using a straw, so not even having to use that, and especially during this time of COVID, spitting out through a straw potentially.
Yes.
I really like it, because you could even do it with a mask on. Nobody needs to know that you're doing what you're doing. So I enjoyed it. New technique, thank you.
Thank you. And it brings the breath all the way down to the belly, that breath, and it also sends the breath to the roof of the mouth where we have energy meridians, right? So it works directly with our nervous system.
I felt the difference between the first breath I took and the third breath that I took.
Yes. Yeah, often when we learn something new, there's like that adjustment, right? Am I doing it right? And we're in that thinking part of our brain where we're analyzing it. And then when we settle into just doing, which is why I usually try a few times, then we can feel it a little differently. Yeah, great.
I was getting silly and thinking about, wouldn't it be fun to have a real straw, and then how you blow out the paper?
Yes, yes. And we can do that. That's another thing actually that I do for breathing and attachment is we'll use like pom-poms and straws. And so you get caregivers on another side of the table, and we get our heads down and we're blowing through the straw. We're blowing those pom-poms back and forth, but the eye contact is regulatory, it's attachment focused, it's fun, it's playful. Yeah, there's lots of creative breath things that we can do.
I love that idea, because it's all on its own, like a game, like even Hungry Hippos kind of a game.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to make things fun for kids, right? Because playing is how they communicate and how they learn. So when we make it fun, it doesn't feel, like work. It's fun. Another one is raindrops. So this one's great for anxiety. And the idea would be that, we're taking our fingers and using them like raindrops, right? And just taking a moment and connecting with your scalp and your head, and just feeling that. And you can go faster, you can go slower. But it's just feeling those raindrops and knowing that anxiety, right, is there, but it's washing away, and maybe it's settling as we bring awareness to it. And some people like to kind of tap down their arms and the rest of their body as well. And yes, we can do it all different ways. We can do like gorilla thumps, where we're doing it a little bit more vigorously, and this can be great for breaking up big energy, right? Or we can do more like the butterfly hug, which I know Patricia has talked about. right? There's lots of different ways that we can do this, but it's just connecting with the body in a way where we're recognizing that big anxiety, but we're moving through it instead of staying stuck with it. Another really beautiful activity is grateful starfish. So a lot of these actually I learned from one of my colleagues in California, which is one of my favorite places. Kristen Mullen and Liliana Hernandez are both therapists out in that area. But anyways, grateful starfish is another fun, playful breathing technique. And the idea would be we're just going to trace our finger. So as we go up, we take a breath in. At the top, we think of something that we're grateful for. So we're not quite holding our breath, but there's a slight pause. There's a natural pause as we breathe in and breathe out, thinking of something we're grateful for, breathing out while still thinking about something we're grateful for. Breathing in, thinking of something we're grateful for, breathing out, right? And just go at your own pace, but just notice, let's start at the beginning so that you can just really focus on the gratitude. Doesn't have to be something big. It could be, you know, I'm grateful to look out my window and see the trees. I'm grateful for Dr. Walker's background where I see the waves rolling in. So just breathing in, gratitude for something, and at your own pace, breathing out. Yeah, and just pausing it again, noticing how that felt for you. Gratitude we talked about last week, but research shows that it boosts our immune system. It increases, you know, wellness throughout the lifespan, decreases depression and anxiety. So if we can build in a regular gratitude practice, it's so, so healing for us. And that's a great way to kind of press pause. Yeah. How did that feel for you guys? Anyone comfortable sharing?
I like the way it automatically slowed things down, and slowed down the breath and did it in a way that I think is really accessible for even young children.
Yes, yeah, that's
Doesn't
great.
involve counting, or it's just kind of very, very, very accessible.
Yeah, and sometimes, thank you for saying that, because sometimes that's what I find is there's a negative association with breath, especially with trauma, because there's so often restriction of breath and constriction. So I find that when we use other tools like visualization or guided tasks and prompts with the breathing, it distracts a little bit away from the process of breathing. And with kids, it makes it fun and playful, but even with adults, it helps redirect the attention away from the breath and the body, which sometimes we need so that we're titrating that, and allows them to actually settle in and regulate the nervous system without intentionally focusing on the breath. And when we learn that that's okay, then we can start becoming more conscious and intentional about that. So anyway, so those are just a couple of fun tips. I could go on all day. I love doing work with kids, and there's so many playful, fun activities that we can use. But thank you for having me here today. And I think now I'll turn things over to Eileen. So Dr. Serlin.
Thank you, Dr. Gill. And I was just thinking I'm grateful for your presentation. Because in so many ways, it's very much of the kind of work I've been doing. So I'm a psychologist. I'm also a dance therapist. And so for me, working with the arts has been a phenomenal way to work with kids, with families. And Dr. Gill, really what you talked about from my perspective are the arts. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit about the role of the arts in working with kids. And can we have a screen share, please? Great, thank you. So the first is, we're hearing a lot now here in California, some kids are going back to school, some not. As we just heard, there's an enormous amount of insecurity, uncertainty, anxiety, day to day, really. I'll talk about my own grandchildren there. One is in school, one is not in school, one is waiting to hear. So yes, the uncertainty, both parents working, and having to homeschool the children as well. We're hearing reports about sometimes from stress going both ways. I've heard reports about, this is on a hotline in China, when everybody's at home in a small space, either the parents' anxiety and frustration is being taken out on the children because everybody's living on top of each other, or the children are sometimes so clingy. One mother was saying she can't even take a shower by herself because the kids are clinging, and so the parents are not getting any time for themselves. So it's really a whole cycle of everybody shut in together and kind of acting out and bouncing out over each other. So the first in this outline, the loss of skills, one of the things that we keep hearing about is that children are falling behind in their studies. It's another big worry for parents. There's new information about the difference between being at school, so kids get socialization, kids get all kinds of things at school that they're not getting at home, how quickly they may be falling behind in their schoolwork. We're beginning to think now long-term worries about this. It also does show up the income disparity. Some of the parents who can afford it are now working in kind of what they're calling pods, which is they're meeting kind of in person, maybe with a tutor, with a safe distancing, but other kids cannot afford this and are home. So it's increasing income disparity. We talked about the stressed parents who are in some ways now either going back to work or also not going, same thing with the uncertainty, at home with the kids. The lack of physical outlets, we'll talk about that too, but especially for kids, normally discharging stress by running around and by being out of doors, unable to do that. And I know that here in California, not being able to go out of doors for the last week is affecting me that way. So you can imagine kids and adolescents who can't do sports, who can't be outdoors. So these are some of the problems we're seeing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the academic ones and refer back to Dr. Gill's model of what's going on in the brain at this point. Okay, next slide, please. Great. So art has in many ways, especially in this culture, I think, in some ways is thought of as a luxury. I know certainly in schools, it's one of the first things to get cut back. And, but it actually really helps us learn better. So I'm going to be talking about the function of art and the function of play and spontaneity. These are not luxuries. These are really, really important for us at these times. So I will put some links in for more articles about this, but there is wonderful research on how art impacts students' academic, social, and emotional outcomes. Creating art helps us to think critically. It helps children express emotions. I'll go back to some of these expressing emotions. I was thinking about working in Israel during some of the terrorist times, and the children could not express their fears of terrorist attacks, but they could draw pictures of houses with crumbling chimneys, or they could also draw hopes for the future, even though they can't express it. A little bit of sun showing or a blue sky is an indication that the kids are feeling better. So most children don't express emotions in words the way we do. And as Dr. Gill said, first come images, it's a different part of the brain. And then by crisscrossing, by naming the image, by telling the story, you go into verbal learning and you embed it in the brain and the other side of the brain. But often images or movement comes before verbalizations. So art helps children express emotions. It helps us communicate. We'll talk about some of the ways in which it's done, especially dancing and movements. We did a little bit of this. We're inventing new ways on Zoom to say, I love you, goodbye, or even we have, elbow bumps and things like that. So this is all about communication symbolically and non-verbally. And through art, we better understand the world around us. To make sense of what's going on is really critical for children now. Next slide, please. Yeah. Creating art through sculpting, drawing, painting helps us to build fine motor skills. So the precision, or the putting toothpicks together and building things, you're really building fine motor skills. We talked a little bit about movement and dance helps strengthen neural connections. We'll talk a little bit about rhythm in the brain and how rhythm helps pattern the brain. I'll tell the story of a boy I once worked with who had learning disabilities, referred to me by his teacher, and he was falling behind in math and skills. We walked in a circle this way, and then we reversed it. Now, walking backward takes all kinds of different skills from the brain. And we just made shapes. We walked and we made a game of it, which we can do later. And then we walked this way, we walked this way. And he did better in math and he did better in school. So the relationship between the physical and the brain is really there. And it's another way to get at some of these brain skills and math skills. And even video games, which is a little more controversial, but can help build executive functions. Next slide, please. Nonverbal expressions of academic content. So Dr. Gill also talked about writing stories, drawing, and sculpting increases comprehension. Embedding the learning in multiple parts of the brain is really important. And we don't want to, sometimes it's just science or math or the STEM and not the STEAM skills are. STEAM is science, math, and art are not taught in schools. You're overdeveloping one part of the brain. So this is really to balance the brain. It can be a memory booster, doubling recall. There's studies showing that if you draw something, you say it, and then you draw it, the house or the story or the character in the book, it really helps you remember. It's more effective than reading or writing because you process information in multiple ways. Again, so we're getting at using different parts of the brain here. Translating semantic learning, which is the words, into images or hands. In China, when we work now, this is always, I love you. And so there's kinesthetic images that the kids recognize and are very good at, but are actually working on the brain. And then effective ways to learn scientific models, even things like holograms, they're all holistic, and it involves spatial recognition of the brain, parts of the brain. So you're developing that also. Next one. And surprisingly, art and science go together. I mean, we've all heard stories of the eureka moments of some scientists. There's creativity involved. A lot of this, and I'll give the website, comes from Johns Hopkins, has a laboratory called NeuroArts, where they really research the effect of arts on the brain, and that they remember more scientific content through signing, rapping. Some kids are making rapping poems, things like that, sketching and making art, through conventional methods like Excel spreadsheets, which are very linear. But if we make diagrams in more interesting ways, the kids remember better. Okay, next. And so my love is dance. New ways to process math concepts like patterning, sequencing, and counting. So I actually used to teach a class about how to bring arts into the classroom, and we would have kids like jump, 1, 2, 3, stop, or 1, 2, or move, 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 freeze, move, 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 freeze. So you're counting, you're pausing, you're getting motor control, and you can translate that into math. And then I was thinking about a story about just the other day with my grandson. I brought bubbles, and he's waiting. It's all in the story. He's waiting for the next bubble, and I say, count to 3. I go 1, 2, whoosh, 3. So you can embed math. I guess what I want to say here is you can make a game of the simplest things. I wasn't going to bring, I do bring but even if we don't have drums, I was just going to use this. Anything is an instrument. And maybe we can try it for a second. So if somebody, I'll do this and then just repeat after me. Anybody want? All right, so it's a dialogue, it's learning to listen. All of that can be done spontaneously at the dinner table. So rhythm and patterning are very important for the growing brain. And if you're in a group, rotation, turning, there are lots of children's games about turning around and going around each other. Again, now you're talking about spatial awareness. It's very important. These are social skills that children should learn about, not taking up somebody else's space. What happens if somebody comes into your space? We do little games of, especially if children feel abused or boundary issues, come closer, stop. Closer, closer, stop. Sort of controlling boundaries, controlling, and again, embedded in a game. There are lots of children's games, but you can make up any game for the simplest thing, depending upon what kind of theme you want to teach. And let's see, are there more? Next slide, please. So theater, actually, Bessel van der Kolk is working a lot with theater. As you tell a story, it involves the whole body, it involves verbal, imagistic, literacy skills. So not only acting out, reading a book, but acting it out adds another embodied dimension. Or even more than that, telling a story with the body. Oh, I came in today, the air quality was so bad, but then I saw the sky was blue. And acting out things for each other about everyday events. You're being heard and listened to and validated and mirrored and all of that. So anything can become a story. Reading and performing plays is a great way to make the most of the summer. So if children can do that. But again, you don't need anything elaborate. You can do very everyday kinds of things. Next. So here's useful websites. I think they'll be posted. A lot more articles and suggestions on things. So I thought we could do, if anybody wants to try the rhythm game again with me before we go. So first, I did this with boys who are hyperactive. So we would do, my name is Eileen. Somebody else want to do a rhythm and say your name?
My name is Patricia.
Ah.
My name is Giselle.
We learned to share.
My name is Harriet.
Anyone else? Okay, how's this?
My name is Michaela.
Someone want to try that one?
My name is Lori.
Okay, so you get the idea. We sometimes will go around and each person can invent a different rhythm. So it helps with emotional regulation. I'll say this, then I'll stop. Sometimes, and I used to work with boys who were hospitalized actually for conduct disorder, and emotional regulation was really a big thing to teach. We'd start quiet, louder, softer, louder, softer. So again, you're learning to regulate with a game, with fun. And I think I'll stop there.
I was just going to add, Eileen, I love everything that you said. It's so much of what we do. But the other thing is trauma is about a loss of power and control, right? And even uncertainty is about a loss of, power and control. And I love taking exercises like that and switching it so the child becomes the leader or the conductor, right? And that restores some power and control to them. And even if they're teaching a rhythm and the parent follows, it's attachment focused, it's regulatory. And the bubble breathing, by the way, is multi-beneficial because when we're breathing and we do nice deep breaths, that is the breathing work as well as I love the math concept, though I hadn't thought about that. So thank you.
It goes both ways, Laura. If I can add this, it just reminds me of stories, at children's hospitals where they use art for the children. First of all, they'll role play before. They'll dress up as the doctors and have little toy stethoscopes and practice it. So when they actually go in and meet a doctor, it's already, what's the word? The trauma's not there. It's familiar for them. And when I was working in China, the hotlines again, what some of the parents told me stories that helped is the children wanted to play and were getting underfoot of the parents while the parents were trying to cook dinner. So they switched roles. They asked the children to cook the dinner and the parents went out and played. And then the parents came back and said, oh, we understand now why you want to play all the time and you don't want to cook dinner. And the kids said, we understand now why cooking dinner is not so much fun. And then they ended up cooking dinner together.
Nice.
So yes, power and control, very much so.
Well, healing from any kind of trauma is to really feel your power again. So everything that we've been saying today really talks about that. Very, very important.
When I worked with this is actually people in nursing homes who had strokes, but it was the same kind of thing with children with disabilities. I worked with my grandson when he was in a full body cast. He'd broken his leg. If you can't, we strap those little Indian bells on the wrist, and just you can hear yourself, because when you have a disability, when you can't speak, you feel invisible. And so that's another thing. It's hear me. I can make a sound. I can be heard. So in any way that you can make an impact on other people and communicate.
I think that's so important. I used to do play therapy with children, and always that they needed to be heard. And so often I had a whole bunch of soft animals, stuffed animals. And so often they would talk to the animals while I was listening, of course, but sometimes I would take the role of an animal with them and play. So that kind of spontaneity, I think, can be so important, because it really is giving them the power of guiding where you're going to go with them. Very helpful.
Good.
One of the issues I was thinking about raising was, and we can unmute ourselves if we want to just have we have about 15 minutes or so for discussion, is how so many phone calls that I've been on with parents who have young children, there's a lot of sibling fighting going on. And I wondered if we have some ideas besides distraction and trying to get them to be a little bit more cooperative. What can we do? What kind of advice can we give to parents to reduce some of that sibling distress? Anybody want to jump in?
I'll just share one technique that I so coming back to the name entertainment that I talked about, oftentimes if we can help people understand what they're feeling, it helps to dissipate the intensity of those feelings. So even with younger children and older children or siblings, a lot of times things don't feel fair. So it could be just naming, right? I'm sorry that this doesn't feel fair for you. Like teaching children and youth to communicate that way with each other as well, or as a parent to be able to name, I see that you guys are feeling upset. What I'm hearing is you think this is unfair and you think that your feelings were hurt, right? What do you need? So helping to kind of build some of that, again, emotional awareness, and then awareness of what do I need when I'm feeling this way can help diffuse those situations, because children feel seen and heard and supported. So that's one technique.
Yeah, I think that's important to really look at why do children sometimes feel unfair. I know sometimes when we're stressed out, we pick on one child more than the other. We try to protect maybe the younger child because the older child can hurt them if they get into physical kinds of fighting, or we just don't listen to everything that's happened. We only see what's in front of us and we don't see exactly what's going on beforehand. So trying to make it fair and listening to where the child, or if one child's saying it's not fair, where that comes from might be very helpful.
Maybe I can also share my experience.
Sure.
We have like a children's center we're starting. We've been operational for the last 2 years now. It's just a community-based center that helps us when the children come in who are survivors of sexual violence or any form of violence. So we have this small space. Maybe I will share just a few pictures, maybe on the site next time or on the Facebook group. So we painted it with different talking points, where we have our conversations where we start with the children. So when the children come in the center, we start with that space where we ask them, can you draw how you're feeling today? And then they draw their feelings and what is happening in their heads. And then we start asking them questions. Why have you drawn yourself like this? Why do you see yourself like this? And through those pictorial drawings, we start conversations with the children. And also with some, like Lenore has stated, some of them can say, because mommy loves so-and-so, they don't love me, or because most of them are orphans. So when someone has taken them in, they feel like they're not loved. They are not given the opportunity to go to school because they want them to do the digging, to do the hard labor. So this kind of drawing, the music, and just to ask them to tell us their story. How was their day? How did they feel at home? So this children's center for us is something that we're just starting. But of course, it's not really well funded, but it's something we set up because it's a place for us where we know when a child comes in, it's like our first point of conversation with a child, just to know what is going on with you. Why do you feel like this? So we've been using music, art, where they draw pictures, and even the small room we have, it's just one room, but it's well painted, where it starts a conversation. When they come, they feel home. We have small dolls there for them. So when the child holds a doll, there's a way they relate with this. So it gives them that space where it's like a safe space for them, for us to have a conversation as children. Actually, we tend to become children. We're in that space. There's nothing like you're older or no, we are all children in that space. And then we have our games. So that kind of dance, music, and art really, for us, we've seen it work, because children tend to hold when they never speak. But if you tell them to draw how they feel, oh my God, they will tell you amazing stories. They will tell you how they feel, why they feel mommy or daddy doesn't like them, or why the caretaker is treating them the way they're treating them, or how they feel even with their peers. So for us, we've seen it work. It's the therapies that everybody has shared, actually, we've tried them.
Mm-hmm.
And at the community center, we've seen them working, yes.
Wonderful.
That's great.
Thank you, Harriet.
I think they really do de-stress either workers who are working with the children or parents. If you can if you can relax a little bit and have fun for a few moments. Sometimes we're so stressed, we think everything has to get done this very moment. And it is a very stressful life today. We're not in an easy time period. So, relaxing a little bit, I think is helpful.
I think it's great as well that it's like all these techniques are nonverbal, because it cuts through so many barriers. I mean, first of all, just for kids, especially small kids who don't have the verbal skills to communicate, but also kids who may have kind of, just generally kind of have difficulties with verbal expression, language differences, just cuts through so much. And it's also so kind of relevant across cultures, music and art. It may differ, but it's kind of, in itself, the idea of music and art is something that's so kind of universal. So it's such a great way of being able to form a connection really quickly, and a sense of community really quickly.
Michaela, I just wanted to add to that, and to Lenore's point, or the question about fairness. You can make a game out of a problem too. So we used to do like dance circle games. Hadon, is that how you say it? Your two? Where you say, especially like I'm imagining in your children's center, kids come from different places. So you say, who comes from this city? Go stand in the middle. And who comes from that city? Go stand over there. Or who's the tallest? Sometimes we line up in size order, because there's all these comparisons that are going on between fair and unfair. So, and then you shuffle it. The tallest ones stand in the middle, or the quietest ones or something. So you're naming it, but you're doing it in a way that kind of brings it out in the open in a fun way, and they get to see all the comparisons played out. So again, anything that gets named as a problem, if you make a game out of it and you play it out as a game, you get to the solution, or you get to name it.
And also it's a way of helping to teach the children their roles and their rights and responsibilities.
Yes, very
because
much.
of like the community where I come from, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of discrimination. So you find children who are born of war, or children who are survivors of sexual violence, or children who are orphaned, children who are within the streets. So these are children of different diversity. So when you do these games, it helps them to understand, to accommodate, or to embrace, or to welcome other children for who they are in this space. And it helps them even to know that even if somebody is very rich, very tall, has both parents, and I don't have both parents, exactly. It's something that I welcome you, whoever you are, because we use all this art and music within even schools where we go to, because there's a lot of violence in schools. So we try to use all these different strategies within the school setting as well, to help children know their rights, but also help them create a safe learning space for each other, where there is no discrimination, there is no violence against one another. They are very helpful strategies. Yeah.
It's lovely, Harriet. I'd love to see more pictures next time. Bring some pictures for us to see. Eileen, Harriet came on last week and joined with us. She's from Uganda.
Wow, I was wondering. Wonderful. Very nice to meet you.
And Patricia has actually been there and worked with her.
Ah, we heard about a special guest arriving from Uganda.
Yes,
That's you.
Our larger group, I told them about your appearing last week and our surprise and delight to meet as well.
My pleasure.
Well, it looks like we managed to get through, even though Facebook did not cooperate with us. But we're hoping we're going to figure out how to get this recording on Facebook. Is that true, Giselle?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to start configuring as soon as we end the call to see how I can then transfer over the information.
And Giselle, will you be posting the websites that I sent you for
Yes,
further
yes,
information? People
yes. I
access them?
I can set that up as well.
Great.
Well, it's good to see everybody. And for those of you who celebrate, I know there are a few of you. This is the tomorrow evening starts the new Jewish New Year, and we're all praying for a better year next year that's peaceful and sweet, and of course healthy and happy for all of us for the coming years. We also pray for strength to get through whatever's left of this year. So we manage. I think with this group has been an enormous amount of support for each other as we go through, and we're going to continue on. We had put together the first 5, I think, roundtables, and last week everybody made the commitment to keep going. So next week we're going to do part 2 of working with children. We have Dr. Kevin Arnold, who is the director of one of the large centers in the Midwest here in the United States, and former president of Division 42, who has prepared some tips. They're now being translated into Spanish, Patricia and Giselle. So we'll have them for at least for our Spanish-speaking people who come on with us. And providers to use them, and maybe we'll translate them as well, Harriet, for you. We'll send them to you in English, and you can translate them if they're useful for you. So we're excited that we will have him, and we'll have chance to discuss. And then Giselle's going to post some of the upcoming. I'll just give you a quick peek, I think. Yes, I can. That we've got tips for adolescents, and Michaela's going to help lead us with that. We're going to talk about tips for older adults, because we know that this has been a very difficult time, especially for many of us who are getting on in years and have other health issues and can't go out very much. And then we're going to look at mourning, because there's so much loss during this time. And we're going to look at preparing for holidays. I suggested maybe something about trick-or-treating, but I think they're canceling trick-or-treat this year. I don't know. We'll see. So those are some of the ideas. And if we have others, let us know. Harriet, when you're ready to come on, you can send me or Giselle a note, and we'll make sure to save some time for you so that you can be able to share as well.
Okay.
And Marilyn, I hope things quiet down in Israel. I know you're going into lockdown again over the next week or so. So do it safely. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, Lenore. Pleasure.
Thank you all for participating.
Pleasure, everyone.
Next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Harry. Nice to meet you. Great.
Nice to meet you too.